Hi, welcome to Priestess Entrepreneur Kitchen Table Conversations. I'm Cindy Morris, your host, and welcome to my kitchen. We all know what an amazing time of transition and change we are in, and those times can be pretty scary. And we need a lot of help and support from each other to go through the different experiences that we have in our lives. Today, I have an incredible woman with me, Susan Osborne. She is a classic priestess entrepreneur. A priestess entrepreneur is a woman who embraces her entrepreneurial spirit, her vision, and her courage, and her willingness to take risks while still being connected to her divine guidance and her intuition. Now that's a priestess entrepreneur, and that's Susan Osborne. So welcome, Susan. I'm so glad to have you here in my kitchen.
I love your kitchen.
Thank you.
It's fun. It is a fun place.
It is.
It's going to be hard not to just wander all over, talking, looking at everything.
Yes.
It's great.
Well, Susan, I've known you for many years, and I've seen you go through a lot of things in your life and some pretty dramatic events that have brought you to the place where you are today. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you've developed your coaching business and your website, empoweredforlife.net.
This is always a big one. Where do you start?
It's a big one. For you, it's a really big one, I know.
It is a big one. And I'll share an analogy I use when I give talks. Because originally I was a geologist.
Oh, see, I didn't even know that.
I didn't know if you knew that.
I didn't.
And I spent 20 years in the environmental field doing environmental mitigation and restoration. But I originally got in it because I loved the outdoors. I felt a real spiritual connection to it. So about 12 years ago, I shifted into this other work. And so I used the analogy of geology. I realized it's still there. It's so relevant. When we think about change, we think about things that happen at a different pace than we might with the geologic world.
Oh, right.
Right.
Yes.
But really, I look at that, being trained in that, as it's a totally dynamic system, always changing.
Always changing, but rocks are a little denser, so we don't see their movement so much, but it is happening.
We do, yeah. But if you look at the field of it, I use a big picture of the world. You know that beautiful view that the Earth,
yes.
That whole Earth series, Planet Earth? I just think of that when I think of geology. It's sort of like looking at it from a meditation cushion, the Earth.
Yes.
And when you think about that, you have the surface of the Earth is only like 3% of what the world is.
Right.
And I'd been in exploring and adventure in that outer world for many years, but my shift really happened when I started looking at my inside. And what was going on there. So when I look at planet Earth, there's 3% on the outside, and everything else that's happening is because of what's going on inside.
Yeah. So how did the shift happen for you? How did you decide to look within?
It found me.
It found you.
They were all, I call them uninvited changes, and they weren't something I would have asked for, and they were all incredibly valuable.
You mean experiences
which led me down a path. So I feel like coaching found me. Even though for years I'd been doing things with goal setting, I got in management early because I always loved people. I wasn't really the scientist other than the process. So I liked people. So I'd been doing goal setting and management and had worked, I had 100-some people and had worked in multi-million-dollar jobs and small jobs. And then I had my own environmental business. But I had switched into a role where I was allowed to do more with corporate and national training, so I could be home with my kids more.
Right.
And after a year of that, that job was eliminated. And rather than go back to the kind of work I had been doing, I found myself in a place where, what do I want to be doing? So I started this journey of exploring, really. And I ended up I did my own company. It was an environmental company. I ended up becoming an adjunct faculty at the University in Environmental. And of all things, I became a ski instructor. I was in my 40s.
A real passion, obviously.
Yeah, but it wasn't at the time. It was something where I had been exposed to it and finally got lessons, one week lesson, and then I loved it. And the instructor said, you know, you had such a passion for this, you could do it. So I realized I loved teaching. So I got on this other path of exploring these other parts of myself that I hadn't really developed.
Which is really the gift of your job being eliminated, which, you know, sometimes when something happens like that, we're like, oh no, I needed that. And it's like really that door closes and huge other doors open.
You can do things with it where you go back and look for the same thing. But I found in all the transitions I'm sure we'll get to today, probably the most important thing was to create that space to allow something different.
Something new.
And, you know, to learn about myself. Each time I made these transitions, I learned so much about myself that I didn't recognize.
You didn't even know those things were in there.
I didn't even know. So I'd always lived in this world where I took the scientific approach on the outside. Well, I started taking it on myself, you know, what is going on? What do I really love? And really connecting. Because you get so caught up in you're making a good living, you're successful on the outside, you're raising kids.
You don't ask that really important question, what do I really love to do?
Yes, because you're doing it for other reasons. And the reasons those reasons lose their value over time.
Yes, they do.
They lose their value.
Well, because sometimes something is valuable at one point in your life and then becomes not so valuable at another point.
Absolutely. That is so true. Because
I mean, if you have a newborn, you really want a diaper service. But, you know, when your kids are 15, you don't really need the diaper service anymore.
You're so right. And it's interesting that you say that, because as I started this exploration of who I was at the time, I found out things about myself I didn't know. And it was an interesting process to start taking that scientific view that I'd always had on the outside and look at myself.
So what was one thing that you found out about yourself that you didn't know? Okay, the skiing we know was one thing.
Oh, the skiing, which actually brought some of my original passions together, because the reason I got into geology wasn't really rocks. I loved being outdoors.
Right.
And I always loved working with people. In fact, one of the things I was really good at was bringing the right teams of people together.
Yes.
And solving problems. So I was able to realize I could do all that without being part of a big company. I could bring the right people together.
Right.
But my passion, I found out, just that wasn't it. I loved the teaching aspect. And I'd work with groups of women when I was doing the teaching of the skiing over several weeks at a time. And I loved the community. You know, I was working in a male-dominated field, and as much as I loved the men and doing the problem-solving, that community of women
How we
so
crave
powerful.
The quilting bee.
So powerful.
It's so in our genes. Yeah.
and it was interesting because being part of that community really helped me through another transition that I hadn't really anticipated, which was I left a relationship I'd been in for 23 years.
Your marriage.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And then the women's support helped you through that.
Yeah,
yes.
The women was a piece of it, but the fascinating thing was I taught these women for 7 weeks, and one by one, women would share their stories with me.
And this was this was on the chairlift.
This was on the chairlift, and at the end, I told everybody, you know, we're not talking about it together, but every one of you has been divorced, and every one of you has shared your stories with me.
And it really helped you.
And everybody. They gave a little party for me at the end, and they were talking about, oh my gosh, everybody's marriage stories are the same, but every divorce story was different. It was. And it was so fascinating.
That is very
interesting. It was
interesting.
people's learnings about themselves, and everyone had their own thing to learn.
Right.
For me, I really realized I hadn't done a good job with boundaries, either setting them or holding them. And I really hadn't done a good job with communicating
during your marriage.
And as our needs changed, as we were, you know, raising a family,
right,
and working through all those things you do when you're younger and are trying to make it all work,
right, and which is amazing. Anybody can do it. Yeah.
And when you're in a relationship and it ends, the only person you can really learn from, I think, is yourself, because everyone brings their own things to the table and their own things to work on. And I really believe all relationships are just about you have a time together, you have things to share and learn and grow from, and it may last your whole life and it may not.
Right.
And
you just want to grab it. You just grab it for the time that you're in it. Everything does have an purpose.